Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back again to As I Live and Grieve. We do appreciate that you keep coming back and listening. Today we have a great guest. I think you're going to find this topic intriguing, and I hope you just stay tuned and listen in. With me today is Josephine Spilka. Hi, Josephine. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get started on our topic, would you just give our listeners a little bit of your background, please?
Sure. I guess I'd say one of the things that's most pertinent to your topic is the fact that I've been practicing Tibetan Buddhist meditation since I was in my 20s. I'm now in my 60s. And that was the place where I first related with people who were grieving, mostly because a lot of Buddhist practice revolves around caring for people as they're dying and after they've died.
Mm-hmm.
And then at around that same time, I became interested in Chinese medicine, which is a beautiful way of looking at the world and the body. So a very poetic way, which is another one of the things that I love is poetry. So
Right.
those things came together for me in my 20s. And so I've been practicing Chinese medicine and meditation now for almost 40 years.
That's intriguing to me. I too love poetry. And I have a funny story about meditation I'll tell somewhere as we go along. Funny to me. But I do meditate, and I take a lot of comfort in it now. I didn't meditate when I was first grieving. I didn't make the connection. So I think it's wonderful that you're here today to help us with that. Now, first, can you clarify for me and for our listeners a little bit, what is Chinese medicine and how is it different from what we know when we say medicine?
Yes. So medicine, I would like to define for
Sure.
listeners and for the way that I work, is the practice of making meaning of your experience in such a way that you are able to be present for your life. You're able to be in your life. So I often say health is not the absence of disease, but the presence of a person in their own experience. So Chinese medicine is this beautiful framework that comes from people who were actually meditating and experiencing their bodies and their world and thinking about how does it work? How does it actually work? How do human bodies relate with sunshine and water and food and all those
Right.
things? And so it's a very ancient, very old, 4,000 years maybe 5, I don't know for sure, cosmology, you could call it, of the body
Okay.
in relation to the natural world. So we have diagnostic shapes, just like Western medicine does, but Western medicine focuses on what you can measure, and Chinese medicine focuses on what you can experience. I often give the ideas like a thermometer, right? Before the thermometer was invented, when somebody asked you if you felt hot, you just answered based on what your body was telling you. But after the thermometer was invented and you said you felt hot, the doctor would say, well, let's measure your temperature. So very different styles of gathering and using information.
Right. I feel like a light bulb just went on over my head. That is probably the best explanation of Western medicine I think I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because they measure everything.
Yes.
And where a Western medicine might, for example, throw a pill at something or a drug or a medication, what does Chinese medicine do?
Yeah. So Chinese medicine will listen to you, observe your skin tone, observe the sparkle in your eye, look at your tongue, take your pulse, and ask you questions. So even conversation is revealing of people's experience. And those questions are aimed at investigating your experience in ways that Westerners are a little squeamish about. We ask about your digestion, your bowels, your urination, your sleep, lots of things that in Western medicine, they just measure and then they move on.
Right.
For us, I was saying this to somebody just yesterday, it's a little bit like anthropology, ethnography in real time. Like we're actually documenting the way you experience the world and the way your body feels to you in that moment.
Okay. And then once in Chinese medicine, let's stick with that for a while because we all know Western medicine. We don't need to examine that further. But in Chinese medicine, you have a practitioner that asks you all these questions, takes the answers, makes an evaluation or an assessment. What do they prescribe?
Right. So they will prescribe either acupuncture, herbal medicine, in some cases essential oils, which falls into the herbal medicine camp. But it's one of the things that I love and use all the time. That's why I'm mentioning it. They might prescribe meditation, what we call lifestyle recommendations. They might talk about how you eat. They might talk about exercise, movement, like Tai Chi, Qigong. So Chinese medicine practitioners, for the most part, are trained around that all of those modalities. There are some people who are only trained in doing acupuncture, but in this country, more often, they're trained in the multitude of things that fall into the medicine category.
Okay. All right. It's beginning to make sense. It's beginning to come together. I'm trying to formulate this question in my head and think of the right way to do it. A lot of people may seek a Chinese practitioner because they're just fed up with everything else. They've received no relief at all. So they may say, okay, let me try it. But deep down, they may have some skepticism. Is that going to be a barrier?
It actually isn't. So when the reference point is the individual person's experience, your skepticism is fine. Your willingness to observe your experience is the critical piece. In other words, part of what happens a lot, and I am sure this is true for the process of grief, that there are layers to understanding as you go through your process. So the same is true when you begin to work with the body in this very sort of, what do I want to say? It's just more, I don't know, ordinary or something. Like Western medical practice often isn't appropriate until we are in a critical situation. There's a lot of room between the first inclination of something and then the place where intervention is required. And
good point.
Chinese medicine excels at all of that place in the gray area, all of that place in the middle. So if you're willing to keep observing yourself and willing to keep being in your own body, then you learn and you see how does it work for you. And the person helping you also learns. In other words, what fascinates me about the way Chinese medicine is practiced is that it's endlessly variable. There's no set. It's not like a set prescription for, one person has a headache, another person has a headache. They're two different people. It looks completely different to me.
Right.
I could make two completely different diagnoses for the same problem. And that makes it fun and interesting. And it's a little bit like detective work.
And how does one receive training to practice Chinese medicine?
Well, these days in the United States, there is 3 or 4 year training programs. When I went to acupuncture school, I went to school in Los Angeles in 1991. So I graduated in 1994. And at that time, the California license, which I have, was the state-of-the-art license, you could say, the most rigorous in the country.
Okay.
And now there are doctorates available. There wasn't at the time. So I have a master's, but there wasn't at the time that I went to school. So That just came into being maybe 5 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years
Okay.
ago. I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
And so there are maybe, I want to say, between 30 and 40 acupuncture schools in the country now.
Okay.
And it is, and most states have regulation. I'm also nationally certified. We have a national
Okay.
organization. We have organizations in each state
Okay.
that oversee acupuncture licenses. So you do have to be
Okay.
licensed. Many Western doctors also learn to do acupuncture. They don't necessarily do the full training program, as do chiropractors and some naturopaths, and there are some combined schools, actually.
Okay. So the 3 to 4 year program, though, is far more comprehensive than just learning to do acupuncture.
Yes, you can't get a license without completing a program. Or
Okay. All right.
I would say you can't get a license with. I don't even know if you can still get a license doing an apprenticeship, which is the old model.
Okay.
I believe you have to complete a program in order to sit for the national exam or for
Okay.
most of the state exams.
Okay. All right. So now let's focus on grief. Meditation is part of the Chinese medicine philosophy. I don't know if that's the right word to use or not, or one of the modalities, perhaps. It would seem to me, with my experience, although limited, in meditation, that meditation could help someone who's grieving. The biggest obstacle I found as a griever is my internal motivation to do something. I might think, oh, I really have to get up off this couch and go take a shower.
Yeah.
And then an hour later, I would still be on the couch. It was that motivation. So as we consider meditation and how it might help a griever, how can we get that motivation kicked in gear? Does that make sense?
It does. It's such an interesting question. I love that question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. So interesting. So one of the ways that I like to talk about meditation is that it is a way of befriending yourself and your experience, any experience. So I think at the point of motivation, the question is always, what does motivate you? What are you interested in? Or, can we examine that place where you are right at that moment when you feel a lack of motivation? For me, I read books, actually. It inspires my motivation.
Yeah.
So I read what are commonly called Dharma books. Many people are probably familiar with Pema Chodron, and she was one of my first teachers. And I met her, which inspired me, but I also highly recommend her writing, which is mostly transcriptions of her talks. And
spell her last name.
Yeah, Chodron is Chodron. Ema, Pema Chodron. She is a Buddhist nun. From the same, we have the same teacher. Her teacher is also my teacher, and I met her in my 20s. And so, again, that is the way I motivate myself. If I was speaking to someone in that state, I would be appreciating where they are, because I think that's the most important thing. I think it's that the idea that you have to get somewhere that can be so depressing, that you have to go somewhere and be somewhere that you are not. And I encourage people to actually be where they are and to seek the wisdom in their own experience, right? The wisdom is right there. We can't tell people how long they need to lay on the couch.
No.
Right? I mean,
no. You are correct. and if you ask them how long are you going to lay on the couch, they have no idea.
No.
They have no idea, because you're just kind of stuck in the moment. I remember at one point sitting on the couch and not feeling motivated to do anything, not even to get up and get myself something to eat. It was just one of those days. I would have half expected someone to say to me, looking back, well, you're sitting there anyway. Why don't you meditate? You don't have to move to do that, So let me tell you my initial experience with meditation. Back in the 70s, there was a celebrity yogi, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And there was a trend, there was a movement on for transcendental meditation. And I remember paying money, it was a substantial amount at the time, in the hundreds of dollars, to go to one of his disciples' homes, which was like any other house, and be trained in transcendental meditation, which was a 30-minute training. And we were coached, I went with a friend of mine, we were coached that we would be given individually a sound that as we closed our eyes and just relaxed, we would repeat this sound over and over and over and over. But it was a secret sound. You could never tell anyone what your sound was. Anyway, I meditated for a while. It really didn't help. I had the sound in my head, but my thoughts kept coming in. And it was never explained to me, what do I do about that? I would just go back to the sound. And I would, after 5 minutes, I would get up and feel like, nothing happened. So I never felt any reward from that at all. Looking back on that, I think, they had great marketing and I fell prey to it. That's the only way I can describe it. So more recently, I have actually started doing some guided meditations. My theory was that in order to kind of learn how to meditate, if I started with guided meditations, hearing words at least would give me something else to think about and maybe stop some of the thoughts. I have a busy brain, and
You're not.
and it might stop some of the thoughts coming in. And it worked pretty well. And I eventually got to the point where now I can just kind of meditate on my own. But that's my experience. So if someone came to you and said, I've tried meditation, it doesn't work, where would you start? How would you guide them?
They do this all the time, by the way.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who say, I can't meditate. And the first thing I say is, you haven't received the proper instruction. So meditation is not about getting rid of thoughts. It's actually about changing your relationship to that experience. So you could say thoughts are experiences. In fact, there are only 3 types of experiences. You have thoughts, you have feelings, and you have sensations. Body sensations.
Thoughts, feelings, and sensations.
That's it. Everything falls into
one
of those. Everything falls into one of those categories. You have thoughts, you have feelings, and you have sensations.
Okay.
And you're not getting rid of any of them. That is not the goal. So what's interesting about shifting in that way when you approach meditation, when you stop trying to get rid of the way you are, which is that you have thoughts, feelings, and sensations, because we're humans and we do.
Right.
You'll notice that as you make a different relationship with them, there isn't so much struggle. And the goal is to actually, as I said earlier, make friends with yourself. So, very different way of approaching what you're doing. I am not a fan of the styles of meditation instruction that attempt to create more struggle, basically, by trying to get rid of the way you are. So that'd be the first place I would go.
All right.
You're welcome to this practice in any state of mind. There is no state of mind that is unacceptable. It is not easy, I will say, to change the way we relate with our minds. I'm not saying it's easy, But I am saying it can be done, and that its goal is
Okay.
that you become friendlier to yourself and others, and that you have less sense of struggle. And
Okay.
we're about being in a bigger space, not a smaller space. We're not about trying to compress our living space, but actually
Okay.
grow our breathing, living space.
All right. So this sounds like it would mesh perfectly with those feelings and emotions of early grief, especially. Once the funeral's over, the calling hours are done, the paperwork is all filed, and that reality just washes over you, and you're sitting there devastated. You're angry, you're bitter, you don't want to see anybody, you don't want to talk to anyone. It sounds to me like meditation might be the best fit.
It's if you yes, I think it's a fabulous place to begin, just to give yourself room to sit down and be, and to just
Right.
have the feelings that you have. And then there is also, we do something called Tonglen, or taking and sending,
Okay.
which is activating even more of our capacity to welcome how we feel. We can do this with
Okay.
ourselves, we can do it with others. So we work with one feeling and we take it in, and we
Okay.
also give back whatever we can remember or conjure of our experience of something easeful and peaceful and joyful. So
Okay.
we all have both experiences. We all have
Sure.
those things we don't like, and we all have the things we do like. So in Tonglen, we begin taking in the things we don't like, giving them to ourselves so we can experience them, and then giving back ease and light and comfort. And by doing that, we actually relieve our own suffering as well as those
Right.
suffering around us.
Wow. So, how long would something like this take for someone who was deep in their grief? And I like that you're not trying to chase thoughts back out of your mind, because someone who's grieving doesn't want to give those thoughts up.
No.
They want to keep those memories, they want to keep those thoughts. That's what they're hanging on to.
Mhm.
Um and all of their grief over what they're not going to have in the future, the things they're missing out on. How long does it take someone to learn how to meditate so that it can actually help them?
Under a half an hour.
A half hour?
That'd be good.
Wow, it'd be a great start.
Yes, it'd be a great start. And I more and more I continue to require that everyone I work with learns to meditate. So because I just feel like that foundation of working with yourself and making friends with yourself is fundamental to your
Well,
health
sure.
every way. So no, it's not complicated. It's easy to learn. It's not. I should say it's simple to learn, not easy for everyone,
Okay.
but simple.
All right.
It's not.
All
It's
right.
not complicated, but it doesn't mean that it's the ongoing practice can be challenging in all kinds of ways.
Okay.
And that's the argument for not doing it alone. That's the argument
Okay.
for having a support person.
Okay.
I myself support people through their meditation practice. And it's funny because it's another piece that I think is missing, the relationship piece. In other words, keeping in relationship through grief, through things that
Okay.
are devastating. It's something our culture hasn't been very good at. A lot of
No.
people get isolated and even excommunicated when they become ill or when they're grieving.
Sure.
Our culture is not balanced in that way or receptive to those,
Mm,
what we call negative emotions.
right.
But from the health point of view, from a meditation point of view, we are welcoming all of that. So again, that can be challenging. But to learn to do it is very simple and very, I think, life-changing, pivotal.
Okay. So someone could contact you and say, teach me how to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And you would do that. Now, I know on your website you offer something, I think you call it a blueprint.
Oh, yes.
What is that?
So the blueprint is a comprehensive conversation, usually takes a couple of hours, where we talk about all of the things going on, physical, mental, emotional, and then I write up a report, basically characterizing where you are now and what I think are the ways you could go forward, and including in that report recommendations for meditation, possibly recommendations for retreats, possibly recommendations for reading, recommendations for diet, whatever is needed. And that's always a great place to start because it gives me a great idea of the comprehensive situation, which I think is kind of critical for good care or good friendship, good relationship. It's good to know the whole of it.
I would agree with that. I think that might be a better place to start than just saying, teach me how to meditate. It might give you a better chance, I think, at finding maybe not a solution, that's not the right word, but just finding a better life for yourself, perhaps, free of stress and negativity. And, there's a whole trend now on mindfulness and mindset.
Yes.
And this to me sounds like the perfect way to go about it, actually. Now, do you treat people virtually or just face to face?
So it's an interesting question. No is the first answer, but I will say most people find it healing to have a conversation in the way that I like to have the conversation because they feel seen and heard in ways that they often don't in most settings. And so, yes. The other piece is that I do teach meditation in groups, which is also, I guess I want to say the alchemy of being seen and heard in a group setting is also very potent. So the blueprint is one way in, especially if you have health concerns.
Mm-hmm.
This year I'm debuting a course I'm calling Personal Geography, which is I'm saying it's where medicine meets meditation, because I'm going to bring all of what I have been using in my own life together in that course for beginners. Because I've been teaching the last 2 years, I've been teaching a group of people who've been with me for a while. So we've this year been practicing on the practice that I mentioned to you, Tong Len. And some of them, or maybe half of them, are healthcare practitioners, and the other half are just people who came because of the meditation practices.
Interesting.
So, so I've just been sort of developing a little curriculum, and I think the personal geography course is going to be the foundation. And I have a couple others that I've been doing. So
Yeah. And where are your retreats and your courses held? Where are you located?
I live in Western North Carolina, up in the mountains. What I have done with the meditation courses is do virtual, because I think that's possible for your health. I think if we do retreats, it's always important to be in person, obviously.
Right.
The blueprint can happen online, but if I recommend a retreat, it will be in person. And I sometimes go to people. I've had clients in California and Colorado and Canada. So sometimes I go there, and often they come to me, depends on their health. But the meditation courses have been virtual. I'm hoping to do an in-person one, of course, because of the pandemic. We've been in virtual land. But I'm hoping this year to do an in-person meditation retreat as well at some point.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. Sounds fascinating. And unfortunately, that clock just ticks away and we have run out of time. I may invite you back for a second time at some point in the future, a few months down the road, because I find this topic, there's so much more to it. I think that we could talk about narrowing it down and focusing on grief and what other modalities or what it might look like in Chinese medicine to treat someone who's grieving. At any rate, before I sign off, I want to turn the microphone over to you, Josephine, and I want you to speak directly to our listeners. Tell them where they can find you on the internet. Let them know what you offer. That information, of course, will also be in the podcast notes and on our website. But I just wanted to give you the chance to speak directly to our listeners. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Well, so you can find me at josephinespilka.com. That is the website dedicated to personal health issues and retreats. You can also find me at essencepresence.com, which is, just for fun, I'll say Essence Presence is a translation of a Chinese term called Jing Shen, Jing being essence and Shen being spirit or presence. So essencepresence.com is the place where the courses are and where there's mentoring, there's meditation mentoring, and there's some courses, Chinese medicine courses mostly, but also the meditation course that I mentioned will be up there shortly. And I want to say I welcome you. That's what I would like to say. I am deeply honored to be with people when they're grieving. And I welcome you.
That's great. I'm going to check out that other website and see what courses there are. For probably the last decade of my life, I made a focused effort to remove negativity from my life. And another little side funny story, I was doing pretty well, and then someone else commented on it, a good friend of mine, and said, that's really great, but what's left in your life that's negative? And I said, well, my husband, because he was a very negative individual, and I struggled with trying to get him to be more positive as well. So that was an ongoing battle. Then, of course, a few years later, he did die. But I do find without that negativity, just in the little bit I was able to do myself, without any instruction, without any coaching, I have noticed an incredible difference in my life in general.
Yeah.
So it has intrigued me, and I've wanted to go to some kind of a retreat for that entire period of time, just so I could see where else it might take me, what else it might do for me. Aging is not easy in this world. It is not easy in this world. And Western medicine does not help at all. Anyway, enough for today. Josephine, thank you so, so much. You have enlightened me immensely. And I'm sure our grievers out there that are listening become a little more fascinated with the concept of meditation and the fact that it might help them if it's taught the correct way. And let's face it, listeners, if you're sitting on the couch anyway, right? Consider it at least. Visit Josephine's website, check out essencepresence.com, and maybe I'll see some of our listeners in a class I might take. I'd love that. So until next week, please take care of yourselves. What a great way to do it. Learn to meditate the right way. Dr. Josephine. We'll see you next week. Take care of yourselves as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.